Okay, welcome back to the Modern Revolution. My name is Pete Deely. I'm glad you joined us again. As you know, in the Modern Revolution, we're not going to go through long explanation on why you should listen to our guest. Instead, we're going to say, listen to the guest and decide, do you want to learn more about what they're saying and who they are? And we'll tell you how to do that later on. However, yet again, I've been very lucky, very blessed that the divine is put in front of me interesting people to tell me interesting stories and convey their wisdom to me. And today is no exception. And Mark, thank you for spending time with me. I really appreciate you, making the space for us to talk.
Yeah, Pete, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be on and to talk with you.
So, Mark, it's our convention here to ask our guests, what problem in the world are you wrestling with? What problem in the world are you trying to solve or putting your energy towards making better? What are you working on?
Well, right now, both just in my role in the military and with my training company business that I run is just really seeking to empower people. I think
Okay.
right now in this day and age, and I think people feel it. They're giving their agency away
Hmm.
in a lot of ways. Sometimes maybe sometimes by choice, and sometimes maybe just through um, just passively through not paying attention, just kind of going along with things, and just so trying to encourage people to be very intentional about the way that they live their life, to empower themselves to become more self-reliant,
Yeah.
to become more self-resilient
Hmm.
in the way they live their life, and really to become more of a creator of your life rather than just a spectator. I think
Yeah.
it's never been more easy, just with the technology and the fast paced way that life kind of goes, that you can, if you're not careful, you can very easily, without really even noticing it, just find just watching your life pass by.
Yeah.
And what a, what a tragedy that would be if in the
Yeah.
end of your life, you look back and you just kind of reflect on the things that so many things that you could have done, things that you missed out on, just simply because you were just more of a spectator of your life than the creator of it. So, the way we do that is through the pursuit of the martial virtues, because
Hmm.
that's the line of work that I'm in. But you don't really have, that's what, and that's where I learned it. But you don't have to be in the military, and you don't have to be into self-defense and
Right.
weaponry and martial arts to do it. You can find it in other ways, but that's how I found it. And that's the medium that I use to kind of transmit those values.
So it sounds to me, so you're interested in saving people from having missed their life before, it comes to its conclusion in a sense, right? Like you're saying,
Yeah, in a
hey,
sense.
you could have your life go by you and then you can find
Hmm.
yourself in that last bit of it
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
regretted that, hey, I didn't. Well, I'm 53, so when I think about my childhood, the concern was with the television, that, hey, you're
Hmm.
watching too much TV. And when I think about
Hmm.
the TV as a dopamine delivery system,
Hmm.
there was 3 channels,
Oh,
and
yeah. Yeah.
there was the stuff that I liked to watch as a child was on in a very small portion of the day,
Hmm.
and then the rest of the day was like stuff I wouldn't have wanted to watch
Right.
anyway. And so
Right.
the drug of choice, so to speak, in terms of, time slipping away, television was pretty non-potent relative
Hmm.
to a device that I could hold in my hand, pull up exactly what I'm
Oh,
interested
yeah.
in any hour of the day about,
Yeah.
anything. That's a much more potent way to lose time. Um,
Yeah.
and so when you're working on moving people from recognizing where they might be losing more of their life than they want to
Hmm.
gaining more control over their life by doing the things they actually intend to do, how do you interrupt this dynamic of what they're used to doing day in and day out, right? I mean, I at least have a historical memory of myself not being attached to the cell phone. Still feels new
Hmm.
relative to
Yeah.
my life, right? Even though it's not, I mean, it's been around with me for a long time, but relative to my entire life, I haven't been living with it. But as someone who's working with military age people, I'm imagining that you deal with many people that are much younger than I am. When they don't know a
Sure.
life without the phone being
Yeah.
right at their hip. So what do you do to
Yeah.
interrupt the pattern?
Well, in one sense, with my role in the military, I'm an infantry instructor, so that part is kind of easy because when they come through our schoolhouse,
Hmm.
they're here to do something, and so the cell phone, it's just not there. They don't, on their off time, of course they can jump into it, but
Right.
during the duty day when we're out training and doing those things, those types of distractions aren't there. But with working with civilians on the business side about it, is trying to kind of encourage them. Well, first of all, I mean, people have to decide what they want. You
Right.
know, we're just living in a world where there's just so many, and there's so many entities or products or companies or things. Everybody is vying for your attention, and
Hmm.
everybody is trying to present you with things that they want you to want.
Right.
And
Right.
not
Right.
saying that all those things are bad, but
Right.
just saying that there's plenty of people out there that have a vested interest in making decisions for you. And
Hmm.
if you're not careful, it's very easy to let them. I mean, there's people that study marketing and psychology and things for a reason. And of
Right.
course, so again, some of these products are good, but some of these products need. So I'm not bashing that, but it's like a pendulum, and when that pendulum, it can swing too far,
Sure.
and so then it's not just buying products, but it's adopting sedentary lifestyle, over consuming
Sure.
content, and then of course we've got media, which is make money by getting you fueled and enraged
Yeah.
over the
Right. Right.
latest, whatever the latest thing is,
Yeah. Yeah.
and really kind of duping you into that somehow if I post this one thing, or if I change my profile picture to reflect this, that I'm outraged or that I'm standing in solidarity, that I've really done something. And you really haven't done much, have you? I mean, really.
Yeah.
So, just trying to get people kind of, not that, again, there's nothing wrong with posting things, there's nothing wrong with participating in those things, but you it there are plenty of things that will suck up every moment of your life if you're not careful.
For sure.
And you know
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing about training infantrymen is that the consequences of not being present to the moment can be lethal. So, I mean,
yeah,
you're working with people who, not understanding these principles have the consequence of not just being lethal for themselves,
sure.
but lethal for the people around them.
Hmm.
In which case, there's a sharp consequence to not learning
Sure.
what you're teaching. Um,
Hmm.
so, I'm curious as until you're in that circumstance, there is not an analogy to that circumstance. Like
Hmm.
you're a lethal situation where it could be the end. Um, we like to say there are metaphors for that. However,
Sure.
there are not. So when you're in the process of instruction, could you talk a little bit about like how do you convey something so important to somebody where it's fair that they don't have a point of reference to understand it?
Yeah. Well, I think, well, whether it's with the military guys or even the civilians, I mean, there's plenty of news stories
Yeah.
out there of, especially now, where cities, crime, violence,
Yeah.
and predominantly it used to be when I was a kid. It was those things only happened in big cities, but
Mhm.
that's not true anymore. I mean, things happen out even in smaller towns, and even in rural areas.
Sure.
We have all kinds of drug epidemics. I grew up in
Right.
a very rural area down in the South, and when I was growing up, we didn't lock our doors. We
Sure.
didn't have to, but now you do. There is no place that you can go anymore unless you're just, and even if you try to isolate yourself and you go miles out of nowhere, yeah,
Yeah.
believe it or not, I mean, there's some meth head on a four-wheeler that'll come in and kick the door down and try to get what he can to feed his habit. I mean, that's just the world that we're living in now. So at least the folks that come to us, whether on the training side, on the civilian, or the military, there's plenty of stories to relate that to, what is going on,
Right.
how are you going to prepare and equip yourself. But and when I started out, that was kind of the main thing that I was wanting to do, is just kind of get people more, not to outsource their own security, right? But I found that in pursuing the skill aspect of it, that there were other types of life lessons that were coming along with it,
Yeah, yeah,
and again, just like you and I kind of talked offline a little bit, after a while, it doesn't matter what you're into, whether it's shooting or martial arts or golf or whatever it is. Once you start pursuing excellence, and you
yeah.
devote yourself to prove, to pursuing some type of skill, then there's all kinds of life lessons that you can apply and do other aspects of your life. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I'd like to ask you before we kind of delve into that more deeply
Mm,
is that the work that you're doing requires you to challenge people's expectations, and so that takes a certain confidence and a certain like disposition to get people to trust you and challenge them at the same time.
right.
That's an interesting dynamic. Did you always know you wanted to do this type of work, or um, like, did it happen incrementally where you're like, this is the type of thing I want to spend my time doing? Or was there an epiphany where like something happened, and when that thing happened, you're like, you know what, this is how I need to, this is my life's work. This is what I want to do.
Yeah, I would say it was a graduated process. So I
Okay.
was, I went into the military when I was 19, and I'm well over 19 now. You can tell if you're watching the video, you can tell I'm well past 19. I've had many many winters go by, but when I first came in, this was what I wanted to do. I just wanted to be a soldier. I thought this was going to be my career, and I ended up getting injured, and so I was out for a long time. I mean,
Okay.
long time, and so I didn't really have a plan B. So I went ahead and went to college, and then I ended up going to law school. And I
Okay.
was, and when I got out of law school, I spent 6 years as an assistant district attorney. So just kind of prosecuting crimes of violence and things like that. And so, it still gave me a way to serve my community, to stay connected to my community, to the things that were going in, and
Hmm.
I could see an effect. I was a prosecutor in a relative, not a huge city, but not super small either, but enough that I could see the impact that I was having. Certain crime rings would go on. We would investigate, arrest, prosecute, imprison, or send those folks away, and that crime, that spree of crimes that were going on went away, and so that was
Yeah.
pretty rewarding. The thing that I didn't like about it was the fact that it was always after the fact that I
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
involved. It was always when someone died, or when
Yeah.
someone got robbed, or someone was victimized. And before then, I really didn't have a role to play. And so when I would have witnesses that were afraid to testify, or maybe victims that were afraid to testify against their attacker, they'd be in my office and they're like, hey, this guy is, he's calling me, or he's harassing me in this way. We can't really prove it. We know it's him. I'm scared for my life. What can I do? And I mean, they're, you can say, hey, file an order of protection. It's a piece of paper, you know what I mean? And
Right.
it's,
Right.
so I didn't like the fact that, and I would have that happen, and I really didn't have a good answer for that. And so round about that time, some of the injuries and things that had a very long time to rehab and to fix, and several surgeries, things like that later. Once I got healthy enough to where I could get more active, I was like, I've got this law enforcement background. I've got this military background. Maybe I should start, teaching people how to be more reliant on themselves, because
Right.
as good as the police are, they're always after the fact,
Yeah. Yeah.
most
Yeah.
of the time. As good
Right.
as they are, it's again, something has to happen before they get a call, unless you're just lucky and they happen to drop by and see it in progress. And so I started my training company, Barritus Defense, and started working on that. And again, when I first started, it was just really focused on, you know, helping people become proficient with weapons and tactics, and even empty hand stuff. And then I started noticing, some of these people come out, they really like the classes, they come out again, and you start forming relationships, and then they start telling you Well, one of the byproducts that I was really excited about was the communities that were formed. It was like, I travel a lot to different states to run these courses. And when I would come back, I noticed that, hey, this guy was at the last course and this guy was at a couple of courses ago, and now they're friends and hanging out and they're
Yeah,
going
yeah,
shooting together. And then I'd go to another state, and like these people were coming together and building relationships as a result of the
yeah,
classes that we have, which was super cool to be a part of that. But then people telling me just things like, oh, I didn't know I could do that, or that's the first time I ever did that. And I started noticing that some of these people were becoming more not just proficient with the skill, but the psychological impact it was happening
yeah, yeah.
with them, that they were becoming more empowered, more confident,
Hmm.
taking on other things. We had a couple people. Some of the courses that I run can be kind of physical, and so I had a husband and wife come out to one
Hmm.
time, and they were we'll just say they had a little room to work and grow into with regard to their fitness. And it's
Sure.
not like I run, it's not like CrossFit type stuff. It's not that physical, but it's a little, some of the things can get a little physical. And they're like, yeah, we just realized, man, we're young and we really should be in better shape.
Right.
So they got in shape. And I mean, the wife, I mean, both the husband and the wife, they lost weight, they got into a fitness regimen, they looked great. And I was like, oh man, that's really cool. And then, and then the thing I started really, obviously people are seeing and they're concerned about where the world's going, where the country's
Sure.
going, where governments are going, and things like that. And they're like, what's going on with that. And so I really started just kind of pursuing about like, well, how do we navigate this postmodern world that's really seems to be swirling down the toilet bowl, if I could be kind of crass about it. But I mean, I really, when you look at the news, and I mean, it's really hard not to walk away with the fact that, I mean, I know that the America I live in now is not the one I grew up in.
Hmm.
you know
Right, right,
I
right.
feel like, I mean, anytime I pull my cell phone and scroll through my news feed, I see, it just seems like the things that I treasured most about the country I grew up in it's dying in a sense. And it's like, well, how do we live in that world? How do we thrive in that world? How do we
Right.
continue to have productive lives in that world when we see that the nation's in decline? And that kind of set me out on a path of studying ancient cultures and
Yeah,
other
yeah.
cultures and philosophers. And they tend to be warrior cultures, but not necessarily all of them, to see that, that's really a cycle in life, to where, hey man, this, they say history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme, right?
Right, right.
And
Yeah, yeah.
there's been people that have dealt with that before. So I started kind of delving and kind of geeking out on that. And that's kind of led to the other discovery that I push. Uh, I don't push it too hard in the classes, because the folks aren't coming for that. They're coming to learn how some skills with the weapon, or
Hmm.
what have you. But I'll try to sprinkle that in. But that's where I do more. I focus a little bit more of that on my writing and in the podcast. We still talk about in the Pearl Snap Tactical podcast. Sorry for the plug, but
Please.
we'll talk
That's good.
about, we'll talk about tactical things, but I sprinkle those things in there too, about, these, I don't know, warrior virtues or whatever. I mean, it's not just warriors that had them in the past. I think
Yeah.
whether you were a farmer or a fisherman or whatever in your community, back pre-industrial age, and from there back into antiquity, you kind of had to, because you were tied in your community. I mean, if you were a dirtbag in your community, you were going to be outlawed or ostracized pretty quick. So, living honorable, self-sufficient lives of hospitality, courage, perseverance, all those types of virtues were, I mean, they were just part of it, it was just part of these cultures. And you see it time and time again. And those things have just kind of, I believe, have just kind of, we've lost sight of that, because as we've industrialized and people have moved from their communities and the families have been broken up, if they move and become more urbanized, it's easier to live a life devoid of that. And not only is it bad for the society, but it's bad for the individual, because it
Yeah.
makes us weak as
Yeah.
people. It makes us empty, without purpose, and disconnected. And so I try to marry those things up because when I see an antiquity, and I'm probably going on way too long, I'm
Well,
sorry,
no,
but
that's your, yeah, we brought you in so you could tell us that. But let me just stop you
yeah,
for a second,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
let's
yeah,
so for you, the road to helping people feel empowered, like, took place over
yeah,
time, and
right.
you had your notion of yourself, like, I was going to be a soldier, and that's what I'm
Hmm.
going to do, and then circumstances happened,
Yep.
and you had to
Hmm.
revisit, like, well, what does that mean? And
Yeah.
then all of those things that made you want to be a soldier was still in you, and then you
Hmm.
did other things,
Yeah.
and those things continue to change and morph. And so, in my mind, one of the things that maybe you could talk a little bit about is the warrior mindset is not just for the soldier on the battlefield, the MMA fighter in the octagon, right? This is something that transcends those type of conflicts. And
Right.
the eh, cultures of antiquity were more direct about saying the nature of conflict isn't just between you and others. The nature of conflict is
Hmm.
an internal conflict, and that's actually like where your battles have to be won first,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
can you talk a little bit about the nature of developing a warrior mindset? Those people who are not living day to day in a military or professional fighter type of world. What should they be thinking about?
Yeah.
As warrior, right? I mean, I think what
Yeah.
you're saying
Yeah.
is we're all kind of warriors in a
Yeah.
sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I, th- I think it. Even Marcus, can you hear me?
Say that again. We lost you for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
So
okay.
yeah, life. I I I'm of the mind that life is the greatest battlefield.
Right,
You
right.
know, and I can't. It kind of escapes me right now. I can't remember if it was Plato or Virgil. It was one of those OGs, right?
Hmm.
But they said, to conquer yourself
Yes,
is the greatest victory, right?
right.
You can prevail over everything if you could conquer yourself.
Yes.
And I think we're living in a world that is the antithesis of that.
Hmm.
I mean, everything about our modern world is not. It's about safety and comfort, right? That's what the whole society is geared around.
Hmm.
We've seen that, and not to get political or anything, but we just see that in the last few years that people so often will trade their freedom, their agency,
Hmm.
their empowerment, are so quick to give that away if they feel threatened or uncomfortable and things like that. And we're about the opposite of that. I mean, yes, I like to just like today, I was out running in the cold. It was 17 degrees here at the time of this recording today, which is pretty cold for us down here. That's unseasonably cold where I am.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I didn't enjoy being out there, but to push yourself. But I'm glad I was out there. But to
Right.
be out there and pushing yourself, and to say, hey, I don't have to be comfortable all the time, that there are some things in life that's worth giving up a little bit of safety,
Yeah.
to have my freedom, to have that, to make my own decisions, to pursue my own destiny, to take my fate into my own hands. But to do that, you have to have a certain sense of confidence.
Right.
And in order to have, and so not to fall through the trap door of false confidence, you need to have a certain level of competence
Yes.
in living and the ability to make things happen for yourself. And that's
Right.
kind of what we're about.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Maybe you could talk a little bit about this. I mean, I think that the um, the trap of false confidence is to, if you do not accept a warrior's way that
Mm,
says you have to start with a certain humbleness to knowing how
yeah.
much you don't know, and
Right.
from there you have to accept the training from
Hmm.
people who know more than you,
Yes.
and express your knowledge of what you've been taught in a way that's demonstrable. It can't be theoretical. I mean,
Right.
I think so much of the value that comes from having been tested physically is that it's obvious. If you can
Hmm.
pick up 10 pounds today and then 2 months from now I come and you can pick up 20 pounds, well, you're 100% stronger relative to where you were there.
Yeah.
But so much of um, life, I think, requires you have to pay close enough attention to know if you're getting stronger or not. For example, if your day is spent in every 20 minutes, you are spending 3 of those minutes checking Instagram or pick your, drug of
Yeah.
choice or whatever, and you have lost now 4 hours of the day, then you don't realize that those 4 hours are gone. Now you don't, you don't have a relative scale. If someone says, "Hey, I need you to pay more attention, spend more time doing
Yeah.
here," you don't know how much time you have or haven't lost. Um,
Mm,
so in the
that's a great
empower
point.
right in the empowering journey, you're saying, "Hey, the first battlefield is your life, which is in fact a battle against your own impulses to move you in
Hmm.
the direction you don't want to go."
Yeah.
But you have to have a certain amount of self-awareness, right? To say,
Hmm.
okay, how much do you know about what you want? you know,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, so how do you kind of
Yeah.
get people into that conversation?
Well,
That's a
yeah. I mean, really, I mean, you could even take it one step back. Is that, that's the first step. You have to decide what you want, and I
right.
think a lot of folks. And there's been periods and, when I say a lot of folks, I mean I'll count myself in among
All,
them. I mean, there's
all of
been
us.
periods of my life. Yeah, there's been periods of my life where everything I'm talking about, I was that guy. But
Sure.
to know what you want, a lot of folks do not know what they want. They're so busy living someone else's life,
Yeah.
as a spectator, or
Hmm.
thinking that they want to live someone else's life, that they don't really know what they want. And a lot of folks are, believe it or not, I mean, I'm convinced of this, that they're afraid to kind of open that door to see what it is that they want, because it most likely, if it's something that's worthwhile and that's worth the endeavor to pursue, then it's going to require changes out of
Hmm.
you. And
Yeah.
we are in those. Change can be an uncomfortable thing, because again, we're creatures of habit,
Right.
creatures of comfort. And it can be uncomfortable to decide what you want to do, because it's going to mean that you have to make changes, and you're going to have to confront things that you're afraid of. And we need some kind of template to guide us through that.
Yeah.
And so we could seek that out, and through mentors, through training. You could, there's a number of resources out there.
Yeah. I mean, I think as a young man, we're going to go and you had a notion of yourself, I'm going to be a soldier. And then,
Yeah.
it gets interrupted. The template that was in your psyche was that I will discipline myself to become more and better than I am. Because law school is not an easy feat either. Like you went and picked something hard to do.
Yeah.
You didn't get disrupted and then go, well, that's it. Whatever,
Yeah.
I'm done because my dream didn't go the way that I wanted to go. Now I have to just take whatever. You instead like
Yeah.
buckle down, pick something hard to do. And when you do something hard, then you know that the next hard thing that comes, you have some of that confidence you're talking about. And it's that
Hmm.
unwillingness to accept something uncomfortable that weakens the person, I think, ultimately. For me,
Oh yeah.
that's a dividing line between the warrior mindset and the non-warrior mindset.
Yeah.
Is that I don't know that we all need to be David Goggins out there running 100 miles with rucks on our back.
No.
I'm not
No.
sure that that's a rational choice for many, many people. However, in principle, the notion of like, are you doing something today that you know benefits you, and you don't really want to do it, but you know there's
Hmm.
virtue involved. Every time you take a step in that direction, I think you get a little stronger. So when
Hmm.
people come to you, they have a notion that they're seeking something. What
Hmm.
type of status quo things in their environment and in their psychology, what type of forces do you have to push against to get them to accept the trade between discomfort and improvement and ultimately happiness? Because one of the things I think you're saying is that when you forego the chance to improve yourself in the direction you want to go, you're a less happy person than you are if you remain comfortable but don't express who you could be in its fullest form. So when someone comes to you, like where does it get the most uncomfortable for them? Like what types of things do you have to challenge?
Well, man, that's a that's a good question. I don't know if there's any one metric. Everybody is coming for a different reason. Some people are coming out to our courses because it's fun. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
like at a point in my age. If it ain't fun, I ain't doing it. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right. Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm just not right. So so some of them they're just doing it for fun. They like the camaraderie. Some of them they get addicted to pursuing that skill, just like a golfer. I keep going to
Sure.
golf because those people are like nuts. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah.
They
That's
like are
serious.
so driven. You know, to you'll see old dudes out there with snow on the ground and they're golfing, and I'm like, that's crazy. You know, but I do the same thing with, you know, I'd get my rifle or pistol and I'd go out and you know, do my training
Hmm.
and rain, wind, snow, whatever it is. So, you know, I guess I share their insanity as well. It's just channeled in a different
Right.
form, you know. And then you've got some who are, hey, I'm there for I want to protect my family, you know, I want to
Hmm.
protect my home, and that's kind of it, you know, that's where it stops. And then we have some that, you know, they kind of buy into kind of my philosophy that, you know, life is best lived in developing virtue, you know. So we take, you know, I'm doing a physical activity, but I'm building my spirit through it.
Right,
You know,
right.
I'm developing myself mentally, psychologically, and even spiritually by marrying up these virtues that ancient warrior cultures talked about.
Right.
But again, not just warrior. I mean, the tradesmen, the
Sure.
fishermen, the seamstress. I mean, even the
Hmm.
ladies out there. You know, these virtues those were promoted within those cultures as well. We just tend to hear more about the warrior aspect because, you know, they're more likely to be connected to those folks who had the ability to write and they were writing about those
Yes, yes,
things.
yes.
And again, it gets back to you. It's like, you know, the most demonstrative thing is, you know, the violence, the epic, the battle, the war, you know, those capture the intention, you know, versus the mundane thing, which, you know, doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, we're not disparaging those mundane tasks at the other people, but I
Yeah,
think that's
right.
just the way that it's come out, right? But yeah, so there, and then there will be those people that kind of buy into that, and then for those folks that do that, you know, we engage on a deeper level together.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. I mean, one of the things that I think from the difference of men and women in this regard, right, is that women, in some senses, many women who choose to be mothers have the warrior circumstance
Hmm.
put upon them as a mother, because as a mother,
Sure.
your choices are circumscribed should you want to keep the baby healthy and alive, right?
Yeah.
So,
Uh-huh.
so
Yep.
a woman's road, historically, if we want to talk about antiquity, you're right. Like the inability to be able to express what's going on in writing change sort of
Hmm.
a lot of our cultural expectations of that. Whereas like a man had to pick it in a sense, right? Like
Hmm.
a man had to
Hmm.
pick circumstances that to put himself in to accept having his choices
Yeah.
circumscribed, right?
Sure.
Which I think it'd be interesting to have, the last couple of thousand years where the stories were told in a little more balance, because I think we would
Hmm.
appreciate the warrior mindset being universal rather than
Oh yeah.
just,
Yeah.
just one versus the other. Um,
Yeah, for sure. Well,
well,
and on that note, I could tell
yeah,
you I've learned a lot about some of these virtues just by my wife, you know,
sure,
and watching her with our kids and the way she, you know, runs our household and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I've learned a lot from her about that. That's helped me uh with it for sure.
yeah. I think that when I think of my own family, like I have a family where my grandfathers were in World War II. They were
Mhm.
they were in battles of
Mhm.
extreme um, consequence, and lost lots and lots of people in and then when they came back from those and they married my grandmothers, and it was an interesting way to come up as a kid, because the the men in my family that had been particularly through World War II were very, very calm men amidst everything else. And
Mhm.
I don't want to overstate, like I don't want to turn them into like characters rather than people. But there was not blusteriness in terms of
Mm-mm.
like who they were. And
Yeah.
I'm in the jujitsu community, and I observe among the people who are the best fighters and the people with the most skills and all that are the least interested in like scrapping or any. I mean,
Yeah.
they're equally calm. You know, and when I look at, so to take it back to my family for a second, with the women in my life as a child were counterparts to their husbands in a way that they had a lot of respect between them, and to be frank, they were equally fierce. So,
Yeah,
you know,
for sure.
so
For
without
sure.
having come
Oh
through,
yeah.
you know, the battles of World War II, they had had enough. And I don't come from a family of means. You know, we were
Yeah,
people.
right.
You were a rural child. I was an urban child. You know, the city has
Yeah.
its own set of things that
Sure.
present itself, and those women were just as
Sure.
tough as the guys. Um,
Oh yeah.
well, let's do this. Let's say somebody's listening right now, and they have an inkling that they want to follow a bit of what you're talking about, and they don't
Mhm.
necessarily know where to go. And the truth is that there are a lot of messages headed in a lot of different directions as it relates to
Mm.
this, not all of which I think are equal in value. I think there are
Yeah.
better ways. I happen to align myself more that, like, if you want to look for wisdom, look for something that's lasts for a few thousand years,
Yeah,
and try and
right.
try and find something with a little bit of staying power to it. But what's
Yeah.
some things that somebody could change about their life to kind of orient themselves in this direction of, you know, improving, not letting it slip away, not letting their life kind of slip away, finding their true intentions and going in the direction of their life that they were meant to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of like what we said earlier. I mean, just take some time, man. Take an afternoon or take several afternoons or whatever it takes, but really kind of get alone with your thoughts and really think about what it is that you want.
Hmm.
What do you want?
Yes.
And maybe it's not going to come to you at first, or maybe you think you've got it, and as you pursue it,
Yeah.
maybe it evolves into something else. But really decide where you want what you want, because otherwise, you know, you're just you're going to be tempted to just look at someone else and you're like, oh, that's really cool, I want that, and then start rushing into something that, maybe that's not for you, maybe that's not
Right.
really where what what your heart or spirit really wants to be gravitated to, and you might just frustrate yourself in the process. But really being willing to take time, decide what you want, and then that's when the road really will start unfolding. It's just one step at a time, not worried so much about what the end result is going to be or
Yeah.
look like, or if you have all
Nice.
the plan. But it's really just, having a strategy of one foot in front of the other and just pursuing it, and taking challenges as they come, because you will. I mean, if you decide today, man, X, that's what I really want, or
Right.
Y,
Right.
that is what
Yeah.
I really want. Well, I mean, I would let the listeners know. I mean, you will be tested. You will be challenged. You will
Right.
find resistance. But then that's where you find your growth. That's where
Yes.
you find the change. Like Heraclitus said, the war is the father of all things.
Hmm.
And it is. I mean, you see the little chick trying to hatch out of the egg. I mean, he's got to bust through that shell, and he's got to exert everything he's got,
Yeah.
because he can't stay in that egg forever. He'll die. And
Right.
so I don't think Heraclitus was, although that's part of it, but I don't think he was just talking about kinetic war being the father, but he's talking about conflict. That
Yes.
that is the father that of all things. That's what creates growth,
Hmm.
is you coming up against resistance against something. So you have to plan for that. You got to be ready for that. You're going to face things that scare you, that are uncomfortable,
Yes.
but that's where it's at.
Yeah, I think that you know, it's like the bones of a person, right? I mean, it's the tension of, as they grow, they stretch, and you know, I mean,
Hmm.
they're up, and they have to have things that push against them to make them strong. If you put somebody in, you know, no gravity, and you grow a human being in no gravity, those bones are brittle and weak, and they
Yeah.
just can't make it. But so it's that that mindset of learning to find that as something. If you can't get to the think of it as pleasurable, to think of it as like, it's, this is not only the thing that doesn't kill me but makes me harder to kill, right? And
Yeah.
I think I've heard
Sure.
you say
Yeah.
that before, right?
Hmm.
We should be useful, more useful, and less easy to kill, as a general
Yeah.
principle.
Sure.
um, Well, before we ask you to tell people here where to find you, I always am a little curious as to an accomplishment that somebody thinks back on their life that they feel particularly positive about. That they are like, you know what? If you're going to remember something that I've done that is an accomplishment, family aside, it's very easy to roles of within the
Yeah,
family context.
yeah.
But could you tell us something that like you achieved? You've had a wide amplitude of experiences. I mean, there's a lot of things you've done. What sticks out as something you feel really good about?
It's kind of funny. Um, it's kind of funny because sometimes you look at something before you do it, whether it's law school or going back into the military at an older age. Like I did finally rehab, like I alluded to earlier, made it back into the military. But you look at this mountain or something and you think, oh man, that's just going to be so tough to climb that, and then you end up climbing it, and you're like, that really wasn't as hard. I mean, it was hard. It
Right,
was
right,
difficult, but like I did it. It wasn't impossible.
right.
So I don't know, man. It's hard for me to and I don't know if it's a certain sense that I don't know. I don't tend to brag about myself much, because I have people that I look up to that have done a lot more than I have. And so it just feels weird saying, well, look what I've done. You know what I mean?
That's it.
So that's
That's
hard to
right.
answer.
We'll give you permission. It's okay. There's no matter who you are, there's always that other person, right? I mean, that's part of the notion of
Yeah.
humility. Is that we're
Yeah.
all falling on a spectrum, and if you're the greatest at one thing, you're not the greatest at another thing. So even those
Yeah.
people at the far end of the spectrum, we're all falling in the midst of
Yeah.
each other's experiences.
Well, I would say as a whole, going out and of course going back, my military career, I'm super proud of that because I was a skinny, gangly kid with flat feet, and wasn't particularly strong. I had a lot against me, and I had a lot of folks saying, what are you doing? You can't do that. And I went back even into the infantry. I'm well into my 40s, and I'm
Mhm.
went back in and hanging with these young kids. um but I think also in pursuing my business, I really didn't know what I was getting into when I started my business.
Yeah,
There was a lot of unknowns, and a lot of fear, a lot of insecurities and things like
sure.
that. It's taken on a better project. But I think, instead of one thing, it was the process of I am becoming who I wanted to be
Yeah,
through this process, and I'm very proud of that.
yeah. Well, that's wonderful. I mean, I think that's what you're suggesting to people. It's like, hey,
Yeah,
there's more available to you than you think is currently available to you
absolutely.
if you find your direction. And then I'm a big fan of Joseph Campbell. You just sound like somebody
Oh
who
yeah.
probably knows Joseph Campbell. And the hero's
Oh
journey,
yeah.
in my mind, is the journey we're all on. But you have to accept
Yep.
it. You have to notice it. You
You
can't
gotta, yeah,
you
you gotta
can't
heed
be
the
passive.
call.
You got to heed the call, and if you don't,
Yep.
it's such a sad because everything then will be so frustrating because it will not
Hmm.
be connected to all the difficulties. Just are difficulties rather than steps towards something greater.
Yep.
Nothing is the thing that's building your muscles. It's only being, you're only running. You're not running to
Yeah.
get stronger. You're getting crushed beneath the weights rather than lifting weights, right? I mean, it's
Right.
they're all different
Yeah.
perspectives. Well, maybe somebody's listening and they're like, "Well, I want to find that guy. I want to find Mark. I want to work with him. I don't know what the heck
Yeah.
he's doing out there at these things, but like,
Yeah.
well, where might
Right.
they find you and learn about what you're doing?"
So, if I could direct people to two places. The one, it'll be a catch-all. You'll catch everything there. But if you go to our website, which
Okay.
is www.barritusdefense.com. So Barritus is spelled Barritus defense.com. And then if you sign up for our newsletter, it's free. I promise I'm not going to spam your inbox. I probably send maybe 2 emails a month, 3 emails a month. But from there, you'll find out, where all of our classes are. I try to share tips and tools and knowledge that are helpful, just not only for your own protection, but for life,
Hmm.
those types of things. And then every time we upload a podcast, you're going to get an announcement on that. And then it's got links to all the social medias and stuff if that's what you want. And then the podcast itself is called Pearl Snap Tactical. Pearl
Excellent.
Snap, like the button shirt that
Yeah.
or kind of, that type of thing. So Pearl Snap Tactical, you can go on there and catch us there as well.
Yeah. Well, Mark, thanks for everything. I mean, I think we're all on their hero's journey, whether we realize it or not.
Yep.
And I think you're trying to like shake people into a certain amount of awareness. Like, hey,
Yeah.
you are a hero and you're on your own journey. Why don't you do it as best you could? So thank you very much.
Yeah, I had a blast. Thanks for having me on.
So today's modern revolutionary is Mark, and Mark is encouraging you to make sure you're paying close attention to your life and to not let it slip by because it's a finite resource and comes a time when it in fact ends. And so he's trying to make sure that you don't miss it. You heed the call, so to speak, as he and I both are familiar with that phrase from Joseph Campbell. I hope that as you listen to him, it encourages you to act. But I also hope it encourages you to bring your own ideas out here into the universe because we need you not to keep them locked away. The modern revolution needs us all.